Good day. My name is Don Medina, president of the NorCal Voyagers, and I'll be your instructor today in this segment of a continuing series of tech videos produced by NorCal Voyagers. Remember, they were made from 1986 to 2003, so there are a whole bunch of them out there. And today's topic is going to be how to change the oil on my rear shocks. For those of you that don't wish to upgrade to any number of high performance shocks, you have progressive shock absorbers, you have Works Performance. Those can cost from $200 to $600 a set. This is going to be just whatever the price of the oil is. I've laid out the tools this morning, and you'll see I have proper wrenches. These are what they consider line wrenches. I use the snap-on. They don't strip things. Again, with the wrenches, we have some sockets, and I borrowed an extension from our host, Jerry Zimmerman, who is supplying us the location to do this job. Not only are you going to need the tools, you also need this little cup. This is a ratio right. Different amounts marked off on the ratio right, so that when you pour your oil in, you know how much you're putting in there. Also, you'll see throughout the day that I'm going to pour the old oil into here so we know exactly how much we've taken out of the shocks. And this is an infant nasal passageway cleaner. This is what I found that works real good to insert the new oil into the shock absorber. Then I like synthetic oils, and this is AMSOIL. I have the 10 weight and the 5 weight. We're going to mix a 50-50 and come up with the 7.5 weight that Kawasaki recommends for the rear shock absorbers. Alright, I've just put this motorcycle on the center stand, and it's stable. Remember, it's a 2-stage center stand if this is a new motorcycle to you. I'm going to walk around here, and we're going to remove the saddlebags. First thing you do is you unlatch it. Alright, we're removing the saddlebag. When you remove the lid, be careful, not all lids have tethers. A tether is something that you'll install yourself after you purchase the motorcycle. To remove the saddlebag, we have 2 more things to remove. The electrical outlet, or the power to the lights on the saddlebag. Then there's a little lever here that you pull out, and then you just lift the saddlebag and it'll come right out. Lift straight up. There are 2 bolts on the back of the seat to remove the seat back. So they're 10 millimeter. I have a little extension with 1/4 inch drive. The reason I use a 1/4 inch drive is you can't apply a whole bunch of torque to it, and keeps you from breaking bolts. Always put my bolts away from where I'm working so that I don't lose them and they fall into crevices. And I start staging them in the sequence which I removed them. To remove the rear seat, now you lift up the back, slide it towards the back, and then it comes out. See these ears right here? That's where these latch onto. See, so when you put it back on, you set it down and you come forward. Alright, we've got the rear seat removed, and when you look back here, you see some wires, you see something black here. This is the transfer line for the air shocks. But what we're looking for right now are these 2 bolts. You see them? I have my ratchet on one, and here's the other one. And this is for the front seat. Now when we're doing this, you start looking around your eyes, because you don't have to focus on removing the bolt every moment. But you see the dust here? This is what you want to remove the seats for, and clean all of this. And this is how you can win first place at the AVA Rally motorcycle shows. Keep your bike looking sharp. All right, so now we're going to lift off and back, off and back. See these plastic little arms? They come underneath. There's some little protrusions on either side, and all you do is you sit it down, see, and it lines up. This is your fuel gauge sensor. So when you turn on the ignition, you see the fuel gauge go up. Underneath this is a little arm with a float that goes up and down. So sometimes when your red light doesn't work anymore, your gauge doesn't work, here's where you start looking. We positioned a 2x4 underneath this tire. And some people might wonder why. Well, when we take the shock absorbers off, the tire is going to fall, the swing arm is going to fall down towards the ground. Without that, you're going to struggle to put everything back together. This motorcycle had a trailer hitch at one time. It's been removed, but a lot of the trailer hitches, you have to drill out this mount right in here that was threaded. And when you take the trailer hitch off, you have nothing to put a bolt to or a nut. And so you have to come in here and have a nut installed. And so that's why I have to have the extra wrench. And with my trusty snap-on ratchet, on a normal bike that has not been modified, you're not going to need the wrench. All you do is remove the bolt. Now we're removing the actual bolt that holds the top of the shock absorber on and anchors the subframe for the trunk. It's a 17mm acorn nut. Okay, it's loose. I've already taken the liberty of loosening the other side. We've just finished removing the mounting bolts from this lower subsection, or this rear subsection. You can see where it moves. Now we're going to remove it, but you have to disconnect the wire from the trunk. And this is the wire right here. It's kind of a little booger, and I could tell you all sorts of lines. The best, easiest thing to do is look and see for the little loom that comes out of the trunk, from the lower base of the trunk, and just disconnect that one. Okay, we're removing the subassembly. We've pulled it back just enough so that we can clear the shock absorber from here. Now we have disconnected the light, so that way we're not putting any undue pressure on the wiring system. But we've got two antenna cables. We've only come back this far because we're not going to remove the antenna cables. Here's the radio antennas on the right side of the motorcycle. The CB is on the left side. But there was enough slack with them that we were able to remove the subframe, or move the subframe back 2 to 2.5 inches. $14mm. We're removing the lower shock mount bolt. You see how there isn't like gorilla strength. You don't need gorilla strength to loosen or break the bolts loose. So when you install them, remember that. Over torquing bolts, what does it do? It ruins bolts. It stretches bolts. So that means the bolt is wore out. If you tighten a bolt and then in a few months the bolt loosens up again, you tighten it and it loosens up, and you use a torque wrench and you tighten it and it loosens up again, it's a wore out bolt. So now we've got the lower mounting bolt off. We've got the acorn nut that holds the top mount for the shock absorber off, and we just kind of just wiggle it just a little bit while applying pressure towards you. See how it's we're just walking it off. Now I felt some resistance, and that was from the airlines. Transfer line, the main air feed line. Right, we removed the shock absorber pretty much from the mount. But before we do anything else, let us not forget to release the air that's trapped inside the shock absorber. So I removed the little plastic cover, and we're removing the air on the rear shocks. And if you read here, it's the right one that says rear up here on top. Just take a little screwdriver and push in the center of the Schrader valve, and you hear it, and you can smell stale air with oil mixed. We released all of the air. Now we're going to take off the transfer line fitting. It's a 12 millimeter wrench. So that it was on there nice and tight. All right, you saw me break it loose. Then these are built so nice. With just your finger, you can just unscrew it, remove it. So now we have the transfer line separated. Try not to straighten these, and that they're old. Our Voyagers are very old, so you can crack things internally like you're not doing any damage because the outside is still pliable, but the inside you can crack something, then you start getting air leaks. Now we're doing the main line. I put the shock absorber back on, and did you hear it pop? Okay, now the thing is, this one had a swivel on the end. Makes it real easy to remove. This one, other one doesn't. Remove the shock absorber and just unwind the shock absorber. See? Ooh, there's oil coming out. I tilted it too much. So it's just time consuming. Now that I'm in the middle of doing this, oh, here's snap. I was thinking I didn't want to hurt the side panel, so we'll remove the side panels for the next side. Here we have the shock absorber. This is the air feed, this is the transfer. All right, we've removed the air lines. See, this is the transfer feed. This is the main feed right here. You can see there's a difference. In case you take this end off, or this fitting off, always make sure that you can read the number for the rebound adjustment. If you can't read them on this side, then you have it on backwards. So, the one with the two stems is the shock absorber for the right side. Now we're going off to drain these.
Action.
Okay, this is a ratio right. You saw it earlier. Make sure it's clean. I use it for all sorts of things. And this oil, we're going to use the used oil, we're going to take it out. Just tilt it. See, this is an easy shock absorber to drain because being that it's got two openings, air is rushing in and letting the oil drain out of the bottom. So this is going to take a while. Just be patient. This is your toy, your pride and joy, whatever you wish to call it. So take your time. Okay, how many ounces are we going to get out of this shock absorber of oil? Or cc's, not ounces, cc's. We're looking for 235 cc's to be drained out of the shock absorber. Does it help to pump the shock? I've never taken the time to pump the shock, so we don't know. Too much oil. Well, if you put too much oil in it, consequences are it's probably going to end up at your fitting up on the right hand side fairing. Too little, and also it'll make it ride a little funny. You could even get a hydraulic lock. Too little oil, and it's just going to be bouncing no matter what setting you twist the knob on the right, you know, the knob that has 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't matter what setting you have that on. It's just not going to have enough oil. It'll be good for maybe 60, 70 miles of riding, but once you start going over and it starts working, the oil is going to overheat. There is a suggested mileage, and all the shock manufacturers, even the Works Performance, and I've called Race Tech, and they suggest about every 50,000 miles to send them in for service. Now, the works performance shocks are $650. So you figure you have a $650 shock absorber, and you take it in for service, and the service is going to cost you whatever it costs you. But that's a lot of money. Progressive, all shock absorbers have to be serviced, or they just discard. We're on the left side of the motorcycle now. As you can see, we've only got one line coming into this side, but we've got acorn nuts on the bottom and the top. This shock absorber mounts to the differential housing itself. So again, we take our 17 millimeter. Let's see, Kawasaki's. See how easy that was? Just a little bit of tapping. You don't have to torque them crazy. Remember, over torquing ruins nuts and bolts. Again, over torquing ruins nuts and bolts. I just went and got my little trusty 10 millimeter wrench. We're going to break it loose, the fitting loose, that is. We have both of the mounting bolts loose. We've cracked the airline. We've broken it loose. Now all we have to do is wiggle. Remember the 2x4? See how easy it came out, nothing fell down? That's the reason we have the 2x4. Now all we have to do is hold and spin the shock. Hold the line and spin the shock around it. Ooh, isn't that nice? Makes everyone happy. One thing I didn't mention on the other side is, if you look closely up here, there's an O-ring, and the O-ring still looks good. It's pliable, it's not broken or cut, so just be careful with them. I don't know if you can even get those from Kawasaki. Alright, what you're seeing right now is I'm burping the shock from the left side. This is the shock that only has a one opening. But let me backtrack a little bit. You see what we've done? Jerry has a nice shock here. So the hoist here is acting as our clothesline. And we've mounted these with just twine. This is the left shock, this is the right shock, the one that has the two fittings. If you look here, it's up over 200 cc's that we've drained out of it. You can see that it's just dark as night. And every so often you just want to tilt them up and you just burp it. This one's almost empty here, but this one drains fast. We've been at this about 15 minutes for this shock absorber. This one we just started, and I have to burp it more often. So give yourself, if you have 2 days to do this, let them sit overnight. See how every time I burp it, it gets another little stream that comes out. What we're dealing with here is when you're trying to pour water out of a bucket that just has a little spigot, and you tilt it up, and the water comes out, air bubble goes in, and it splashes everywhere. Well, this is the same thing that's happening here on a minute scale. We finished draining both of the shock absorbers. It's been about an hour. Of course, this one with the two fittings, this is the right one, was much faster. And this is the left side shock, and it only has the one fitting opening. And it took us a while. We actually had to insert a little nozzle in there and just barely put any pressure. We put like 5 pounds of air pressure in here, and it helped us bleed this one. But now we're all set to start adding oil to the shock absorbers. The ratio right, I have 230 cc's, give or take 3 or 4 cc's in here, in this ratio right I should say, and it's AMSOIL shock therapy. It's a combination of 5 weight and 10 weight shock therapy oil, fully synthetic. And you notice the difference when you use synthetic. This is our nasal cleaner for infants. So all it is a bulb. I just squeeze all the air out of it and then just fill it. You can see the oil levels start to drop on the ratio, right? And then I just come up here. And this one we're going to do first because it's so much easier. We filled this shock with oil, and this is our last bit of oil to go into this shock. This is the one with the single outlet, which is the left side. Now with this little nasal syringe, put it under, seal it completely tight, push down hard on it, constant steady pressure, not crazy, just keep coming down. And there's about 35 cc's of fluid in here. Then when we're done, just release it. You'll hear the gurgling, then remove it. Did you hear that little psh? There you are. It's full of oil. Now, we didn't record all this because it took about an hour to get both of them filled. You have to be patient. At the very beginning, all we were doing was we're putting in drops at a time. Just a little bit of drops. You'd get airlock in here. We'd have to just compress the shock just a teeny bit, and you'll see the air bubble. And once you get enough fluid in there that it has enough weight for the bladder to start to just work itself down, and you have plenty of room up here, the volume. Full of oil, fresh oil. Remember, double check to make sure that you have a nice O-ring here, and you start it, and you're going to twist the shock because there isn't a swivel end on this airline, so it's going to take a bit. Just be patient. Oh, we work mysterious things. Wasn't that amazing? It's going on. Okay, it's finger tight. What I'm going to do, slide it on. Now remember the 2x4 that we had below? Use your arm and just lift a little bit at a time. Now you're not going to have anyone to help you, so you can't. Now it's on. First thing we want to do is get that 10mm wrench to tighten up that fitting. Now these aren't your normal brass fittings. These are steel fittings, so they can handle a little bit more torque, but not a whole lot. So I had to pull the top of the shock out, nice and snug, not tight, snug. Now we're going to get the acorn nuts. Shock is on. Put the washer on for the lower acorn nut. You just spin it on, finger tight, and then put the upper one. Upper one, you have 3P. Flat washer, lock washer, acorn nut. If you look at it, one side is clean, the other side is dirty. Clean side always goes to the inside. So the flat washer goes first, then the lock washer, then the acorn nut. These you're just going to barely thread them onto the stud there. And the reason is this sub-assembly will go back and notch onto these. We're here with the second shock absorber. We've already put on the one on the left side. Okay, here's the dial. We're back to 1. We're going to start off on 1, so the owner of this motorcycle, who's our photographer, will see the difference. So we're just going to do the main line first. So she's on. Again, I didn't talk about it, but we checked the O-ring on this one to make sure it was good. We're not removing this nipple, so there's no ring underneath it as well. But he wasn't complaining about air loss on this motorcycle. So we've got this one on. We've tightened this, hand tight, this fitting. This is the one for the main airline. It doesn't have a swivel. So you saw how we were twisting the shock, and instead of the hose, we were twisting the shock to thread it on. So we've got it on hand tight. We're coming back with the wrench, and we're snugging it up. Not tight. We don't want to go crazy with this. So this is a small wrench. There you go. Now you can always tighten a little more if you didn't put it on tight enough. But once you stretch all the threads on it, well then you can't do that. You got to buy the hose, or you have to buy the shock absorber. So it's very expensive. So a little bit at a time. Don't go crazy. There, see, that's on there. So we make sure this is on. Now, remember, this has memory. This is the transfer line. It's got the swivel fitting. See how that swivels? So this is going to be easy. Whoa, look at that little son of a gun. It's just on. See how can you see it on the camera there? It's going down. One of the good things that we got to do while the shocks were off were clean them real good on the backside. We go to the 12 millimeter wrench. Okay, she's on there nice and snug. Make sure it's on there. When you, just a note, this is the rear brake line. You notice how it runs underneath the shock absorber? When you're putting those on, when you buy them from NorCal Voyagers, your steel braided brake lines, you have to remove this lower mounting bolt. See how easy that is? Nothing's dropping down. So when you decide to spend the money for steel braided brake lines, you have to remove this lower mounting bolt. See how easy it went back on? It's 14 millimeter. And I'm not sure exactly what the torque is on these, but we'll find that out in a little bit. I brought a wrench, which I didn't need. This is the nice air pump. You can see that, it'll focus. This is a Harley Davidson air pump, but someone showed me a Kawasaki one just a few moments ago, and they're just as nice. Well, we take off the cap, thread this on. We're going to pressurize it before we go much further. That way, in case we made a mistake somewhere. Even though it seems like I'm working a lot here, do not take the shortcut and use an air compressor or compressed air to fill this. You'll blow out both of your shocks, and then you'll get to cry all the way to the bank to remove $200 and some odd for the progressive shock absorbers. Okay, we're coming up on 40 pounds. Okay, what we've done is put a little bit of dish soap or laundry soap in a bottle, spray bottle, and you just spray the fittings. Nothing there. If there was a leak, you'll see little bubbles starting to spray out of or form at the base. This is the same way. There's nothing coming out of this. Well, we've got the shocks on. We've tested for air leaks. You saw that. We have no air leaks. We have 40 pounds of pressure in the shocks. Now it's time to put the subframe back in place so we can tighten up the upper shock mounts. So we just grab hold of the trunk. There. We just got it in, slid in place. Now we go and grab our trusty little bolts. Remember, this had a trailer hitch on it, so if you've never had a trailer hitch on your bike, it's going to be real easy. All you do is you grab this bolt, slide it on, slide it through.
Higher, lower.
We got it. Thank you. That was Kurt. He's the owner of the vehicle and our official photographer. So we have a little spacer made for this. Now, this is only going to happen if you've had a trailer hitch and they've removed it. I finished tightening the 8-corner nuts or the mounting bolts on the left shock. You saw us a little bit ago, we did the lower one. Now we're doing the upper 8-corner nut. I'm using a wrench instead of a ratchet because I didn't bring a socket with me today. And I didn't want to borrow all the tools from a certain guy. All right, 22 foot-pounds is what we found. All right, we're torquing it down to 22 foot-pounds. There's 22, double check, double check. Okay, there we are. We're going to plug in this plug for the trunk. What I've done is just put a nice goob of dielectric grease on the female end of the plug. Put the cap back on. You see the little tang and then the probe, which is also the lock. Once you get them aligned, you just push it in. Okay, what we have is a corrosion resistant connection right now. And if you wanted to play with it, you just slide it in and out a few times and it usually cleans off all the corrosion. We're going to put the bags on. One thing you want to notice, or you make sure that these rubber grommets are in their slots. Okay, we've inspected. Now what are we talking about? I'm going to remove one of these. These are the rubber grommets. I'm going to leave it alone because these on there tight. These are rubber grommets to keep the bags from rattling and making plastic to metal contact. And you have these grommets on your front fender. A lot of people have lost the grommets on the front fender, so they're cracking. Make sure you have the rubber grommets. We're spraying the silicone lube just to make installation of the saddlebag much simpler. Remember to look down, make sure that those grommets are perfect circle. Wow! With the lubrication, they just pop into place. See that? Don't forget to plug the turn lights in. Here we have the front seat. When you look at your motorcycle, you're going to look at these two tangs that stick out of the fuel tank, and you wonder what they're for. They're for this tang here, or those are tabs. This is a tang. And what they do is they hold the front of the seat, so you go in underneath it like that, and then see the front will not come off. A wonderful little idea that these people at Kawasaki had. So I'm using a 1/4-inch drive socket set. If these other big studs were 22 foot-pounds, these are probably going to be like 7 or 8 foot-pounds. So just choke up on the ratchet if you don't have a torque wrench and just get it snug that way. We're putting on the rear section of the seat. There she is, first time. Push down on the front of the seat when you're sliding forward so it'll go underneath and latch itself. We have these 6mm bolts or 10mm head. We put them on the back. Now remember, your motorcycles are getting old now, so sometimes these bolts are going to be worn out. So don't be afraid to go down and buy some stainless steel 6mm bolts for your pride and joy. This is your pride and joy. Kawasaki 1200 Voyager. This is Kurt's pride and joy. Kurt's our vice president and also photographer. This is the 10th anniversary model. What we've done just now will bring new life to this motorcycle. Kurt had already done the progressive spring suspension upgrade on the front forks. Now we've done the rear shocks, changed the oil. Total time was 4 hours and 45 minutes. It is a long time, but most of that was spent draining the oil and refilling the oil in the shocks. With this job, you're going to feel like you just put on brand new $300-400 shocks. Thank you for purchasing this video. We hope that your job was as successful as ours. Until the next video, this is Don Medina from NorCal Voyagers.
Hello, this is Kirk, the owner of the 96 Voyager with 48,000 miles on it. I was skeptical about how much of a difference in the before and after ride feel. I can attest it is significantly better. Cushier without bottoming out, much more stability in sweeping corners, no yawing around the corner.